This video is brought to you by Captivating History. William the Conqueror is probably best known for his depiction in the Bayeux Tapestry, which details the events of the Battle of Hastings in 1066. However, William had an incredible impact on the world, far beyond that of a single battle. He was born at Val-ès Castle in the northwest of France around 1027 CE. His father was Robert I, Duke of Normandy, and his mother a commoner named Herleva. Historians believe that William was born out of wedlock. At the time, this was not an issue, as his mother was most likely a concubine of the Duke, and the offspring of an official mistress had the same rights as legitimate children. Decades after he died, scribes who disliked him as a ruler used the situation of his birth to discredit his reign. The feudal system in France meant that although France was a kingdom, it consisted of many independently governed local regions. These principalities had developed following Viking invasions, and each was struggling to gain more power and territories. As William would often travel with his father, it is clear that he would be Robert I's legitimate successor. He is mentioned at least 7 times in monastic charters that would write the name of the noble followed by that of the heir. As he was the ruler's firstborn son, he attended many meetings. These meetings were often in church, so William had a good grasp of Latin and held the written word in high regard. This did not mean that he was literate. He could speak and understand basic Latin. He also was taught to fight and hunt, as well as learning the intricacies of court life. William had a loving childhood, close to his mother and father, and grew into a handsome and strong young man. In 1035, when William was about 8 or 9, his father died during a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Before Robert I had left, he had asked the lords to accept William as their military commander and rightful heir, which they did readily. So when news of Robert's death reached Normandy, William was affirmed as ruler immediately. William's family ties were extensive, and his father's donations to the church had been generous, so it was a prudent move for the clergy and aristocracy not to try and usurp the young monarch. As he was considered too young to rule, he had guardians that both taught him and governed in his stead. In 1042, William officially began to act as Duke at the age of 15. He was keen to assert himself, as there had been a brief rebellion while he was still underage. He won his first military campaign about a year after officially gaining his title. William demonstrated his ambition to rule with both combat prowess and tactical marriages. Even at 15, William knew his best strategy would be to maintain unity. Before the decade was out, William and his entourage had grown into a mighty political force in the region, and other influential people started to take notice. Guy of Burgundy, the Count of Brionne, was William's cousin and had been his childhood companion for a short while. As the youngest son of Count Reginald I, he was unable to ascend to the throne of his father, so he set his sights on William's. He possibly used William's supposed illegitimacy to strengthen his case, and found support among nobles who were dissatisfied with William's rule. Most of these co-conspirators were old, set in their ways, and saw William as a young man determined to govern using new methods. Towards the end of 1046, when William was 19, he fled Normandy after an assassination attempt. He traveled to Poissy, near Paris, to meet with King Henry I. In the summer of 1047, he returned to rally his troops. His army met with King Henry's at Caen and marched on the plain of Val-ès-Dunes to fight the rebels. Despite being outnumbered, William and Henry's forces prevailed, beating back the rebel army to the River Orne. They forced soldiers into the river to drown and slaughtered any survivors. They were uncommonly brutal, perhaps to solidify their victory, a tactic that William would employ throughout his life. Guy of Burgundy retreated to his castle, which William's army then besieged for 2 years until Guy submitted. William pardoned Guy and allowed him to stay at his castle under a house arrest of sorts. Guy was humiliated, having lost all of his castles and land. He exiled himself to his native Burgundy, where he would try and steal power from his older brother. The victory at Val-ès-Dunes would be enough to secure William 5 years without a rebellion. William then began to elevate his closest allies into positions of power within Normandy. Tensions between Normandy and Anjou were growing, and William decided to go to war with one of the most powerful lords in the region, Geoffrey Martel. In 1051, Martel took the province of Maine. In response, William laid siege to 2 towns, Alençon and Domfront, on the border of Normandy and Maine, who had risen in support of Anjou. First, he attacked Domfront, which caused Martel to withdraw. But the Domfront held out on their own and refused to surrender. William then continued to Alençon. The garrison inside the town began to mock William's mother, namely her heritage. William became so enraged, he ordered his soldiers to burn the place down and chop off the hands and feet of the mockers. Alençon surrendered, at which point William returned to Domfront, who immediately followed suit after hearing what had happened at Alençon. William had no time to rest, as King Henry I had allied with Geoffrey Martel. Despite being a former ally of William, King Henry I was not pleased with William's successes, as he wanted to expand his power and did not want such a dominant rival. In 1054, William was victorious against King Henry's troops in the Battle of Mortimer. The battle ended with a truce between William and Henry, but King Henry and Geoffrey Martel would again invade Normandy 3 years later. In the meantime, William was attending to personal matters. He married Matilda, daughter of the court of Flanders, and together they would have 7 children before his famous campaign in 1066. William's strong marriage and growing family, along with papal support, increased his power and influence. In 1057, King Henry and Martel attacked again. This time, William waited for them to advance across Normandy. His patience paid off, and he defeated them with a surprise attack from behind. Henry and Martel barely escaped with their lives. Their army was not so lucky. William was brutal in his slaughter of the soldiers, far beyond the usual standards of the time. His atrocities gave him a reputation fierce enough that no other foreign force would invade Normandy during his lifetime. With Normandy united under his rule, William looked to expand his empire, and his eyes were on England. England was a country of invaders, and power was constantly changing hands. The noble families of Europe and Scandinavia were so intertwined during this period that many men could lay a claim to prominent titles, however tenuous. In the court of Edward the Confessor, who ruled from 1042 until January 1066, was a Norman noble, Robert of Jumièges. Robert quickly rose from Bishop of London to Archbishop of Canterbury, and often clashed with English noble Earl Godwine. This feud would result in the deaths of the two men, a succession crisis in England, and William's invasion of England. Earl Godwine planned to rise up against the king, Edward the Confessor. Upon learning about this upcoming conflict, Robert of Jumièges fled to Normandy and subsequently was outlawed as a criminal. During this time, Robert met with William and informed him that Edward had named William as heir to the throne of England. Back in England, Godwine's rebellion had come to nothing. He remained Earl of Wessex and was succeeded by his son, Harold Godwinson. Edward named Harold his successor on his deathbed, and Harold Godwinson was crowned the day after the old king died, January 6, 1066. William's power had been steadily growing in the years leading up to 1066. Both of his significant rivals had died, and Henry's son was only 8 when the king passed, so he was not of age to rule. One of the regents who ruled in his stead was none other than William's father-in-law. William went on to have several successful and brutal military campaigns, which left him with many powerful allies. Upon Edward the Confessor's death, there were a few claimants to the throne, so Harold was well aware that his position as king was not secure, and that William was one of the many preparing to invade England. Harold decided William was his most significant threat, and within a few months had amassed his troops and stationed them along the English coast. William wasted no time gathering his allies and gaining permission from the Catholic Church to justly invade England. By August, the two armies, both roughly the same size, had gathered on the opposing shores of the English Channel. However, William postponed crossing the Channel until late September, when Harold traveled north to face other invaders. Once in England, William set up camp at Pevensey, building a wooden fort as a temporary headquarters while raiding the surrounding countryside. At Hastings, he used an old Iron Age fort as his base, continuing the looting and raiding to crush local morale and sustain his troops. Harold was essentially fighting a war on two fronts, and by the time he got back to the south, he found the land and people utterly ravaged. Hoping to catch William by surprise, he headed for the coast, but William's scouts spotted him. On October 14th, the armies finally met each other in combat. The fighting lasted from morning until dusk, making it one of the longest battles in medieval history. William's men used feigned retreats to encourage the English soldiers to advance, only to turn and massacre them. The battle was as bloody as it was lengthy. Harold lost his life, with some reports claiming it was an arrow to the head. William's men continued to slaughter the English soldiers well into the night, with William refusing to spare anyone or take any prisoners. Some written sources mention that, come daybreak, William allowed the survivors to bury their dead, including Harold Godwinson, who was most likely buried at Waltham Holy Cross Church. William continued raiding and pillaging the south until he reached London, and on Christmas Day, 1066, he was crowned king. He immediately started giving lands to his closest collaborators, as well as nobles who had submitted to him early in his campaign. William had plenty of rebellions to quash, and this was nothing unusual for the new king and his followers. He commissioned the building of various castles to station troops and asserted that he was in charge. In May 1068, he had his wife Matilda crowned Queen of England. William's reign as monarch of England echoed his early years as Duke of Normandy. He was a harsh and brutal ruler, meeting rebellions by murdering thousands of people, burning villages, and sacking any towns that dared oppose him. But ruling both England and Normandy proved to be a monumental task. In 1070, trouble started brewing for him. Back in France, he lost territories. Rebels had overthrown some of his allies. And sometime between 1070 and 1071, his second son Richard died in a hunting accident. Then a large-scale rebellion, the Revolt of the Earls, took place in 1075, which William dealt with in his usual style. Around 1077, William's eldest son, Robert, later known as Curthose, meaning short stocking, started to feel sidelined. He was old enough to take power, but William wasn't about to give any up. Robert staged a rebellion in Normandy, which nearly ended in William's death. Afterward, Robert remained the heir of Normandy and reconciled with his father, but with a strained relationship. On November 2, 1083, William's wife Matilda, Queen of England, died, leaving William devastated. William had many legacies, one being the famous Domesday Book. This lengthy text, commissioned in 1085, contains a survey of all the lands and properties held by him and his supporters. In addition, it included names of counties, tax assessments, and available resources. Modern historians have found it an invaluable reference for life during William's reign. William's final year was no less eventful than his previous ones. He returned to France in 1086 and arranged the marriage of his daughter to Alan, the Duke of Brittany. Even in his late years, he was still forming allegiances and waging wars. During the Siege of Monte, he fell ill. Before he died, he named his eldest son, Robert Curthose, as his successor in Normandy. William's second son, William Rufus, became King William II of England, while his youngest son, Henry, received a financial inheritance. He also ordered the distribution of money to the poor, and all of his prisoners were to be released. William died on September 9, 1087, at the age of 59. The King of England and the most powerful man in northern France had truly earned the moniker Conqueror. To learn more about William the Conqueror, check out our book, William the Conqueror, a captivating guide to the first Norman king of England who defended the English army, led by the king of the Anglo-Saxons in the Battle of Hastings. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Also, grab your free mythology bundle ebook while it's still available. All links are in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.